Welcome. This exercise, we will configure and test router on a stick, troubleshoot accordingly. The objective is to configure the router to route VLANs or traffic between those VLANs. In the topology, you can see that there are 3 VLANs created. VLAN 100 for accounting, VLAN 101 for IT, and VLAN 102 for HR. Once the topology is configured and routing proper, HR will be able to communicate with IT or accounting, and accounting will be able to communicate with IT and HR, and same for IT. There will be no ACLs configured in this lesson. However, on top of the router on a stick configuration, we will configure DHCP to enable these clients to get IP addresses from the correct network. So take a moment to look at the topology. The router is going to do all of the routing. The switch is just going to be a layer 2 switch. We're not going to do layer 3 switching here. So all the routing will take place on gig Ethernet 0/0. On the switch, gig Ethernet 0/0 will also be a trunk port, which will pass all VLANs up to the router. For the links going to the clients, those will be access ports, and their VLAN tag. We use 802.1q for the encapsulation, and the corresponding VLANs will be 100, 101, 102. So the primary purpose that brought us routing on a stick is the fact that interfaces on routers I should say, only had a couple interfaces, and to get a router with multiple interfaces costs quite a bit of money. So one of the solutions to the challenge was to take a physical interface and split it up into virtual or sub interfaces. So on this particular router, there is one physical interface and 3 sub interfaces below that. So I will configure the router first, the switch second, and the last step will be to configure the DHCP scope, the DHCP pools and scopes on the router. At that point, we will validate the clients or the PCs, pick up an IP address from the correct DHCP pool, and then last we will test communication between them. So the first step, I will go into the router. In the screen, you can see the router is labeled R1. The switch is labeled switch 1. So let me bring the switch up here. So the switch will be on the right, the router will be on the left, and the 3 clients will be in the center below that. So for the router, let's first create some sub interfaces. So we're going to go into global config. And here I have created interface gig 00.100, where 100 does not necessarily mean the VLAN tag. It's a number that doesn't correlate to the VLAN tag. However, the encapsulation does correlate to the VLAN tag, the 802.1q tag. It's very common to have these match, but know that they do not have to match. With these commands I've issued here, I've given a description, I've set the encapsulation, and I've given an IP address. So accounting is done. I will do IT next. As you see, everything is the same, except for I have incremented the number on the sub-interface, and I have changed the encapsulation. And the last one will be for HR, and that one is complete as well. I will exit, and I do want to show one important detail. By default, routers interfaces are disabled or administratively down. Switches interfaces are up out of the box. So with that said, since this is a brand new router out of the box, the interface will be down, and all we need to do is bring up the physical interface, not each individual sub-interface. So we'll give that a no shut. We will validate. There we go. The physical interface is up, as well as all sub-interfaces, as outlined in the line protocol and admin status column. Alright, we will move to the switch next. So I'm going to start off with the show VLAN. Let's see what VLANs exist, because we know that we need to create some new VLANs. So as you see, it's a brand new switch out of the box. As the default VLAN, which is 1, and we will create 100, 101, and 102 for the corresponding departments. So to do that, we'll go config T, and the commands are as follows. VLAN 100 creates the interface, creates the VLAN, and we give it a name. VLAN 101, we give it a name. And VLAN 102, we give it a name. Let's validate our changes by a show VLAN. As you can see, VLANs are created. Our descriptions or names made it in, and there are no interfaces configured for each of those VLANs. So the next step, we are going to configure the trunk port that runs between the switch and the router. That's going to be interface gig 00. We do not need to do a no shut, because as I said, switches interfaces are up by default and not down. So we're going to give it a description as the uplink to the router. We are going to set the encapsulation to .1Q. And we are going to make that port a trunk. Okay, now that that is complete, we need to configure each of the ports that go to the client workstations as an access port on the correct VLAN. Okay, that is complete. Gig 01 goes to the accounting PC. I've given it a description. It's an access port on VLAN 100. As you see, I did not do a no shut because switches ports are up by default out of the box. Gig 02 goes to the IT PC. And gig 3 goes to HR. Let's validate our interface status to make sure our links are up. As you see, status is connected for our uplink, and our client PC for accounting is up, client PC for IT, client PC for HR, and the VLANs correspond as well. You can also do the show VLAN. We could also see now that these ports are assigned those newly created VLANs. At this point, everything should be up. However, the clients do not have an IP address. So we could either give them static addresses, and that would involve giving them an IP address, a default gateway, and if you subnet mask if you wanted a DNS server. However, we're going to take the easier approach, and I'm just going to stand up a DHCP server on the router. That way these clients could acquire an IP address within their corresponding network. So let's take a note of the client PCs on the screen here. Let me log into each one. As you see, the network interface card says no network connection on all three. An IF config also shows that we do not have an IP address for our Ethernet 0 adapter. I will refresh each one. There you go. So if everything is configured correct, once we create a DHCP server and these client PCs go through the process, they should have an IP address. So I will paste in my configuration for the accounting DHCP. So first thing, you always would need to exclude the addresses that you do not want to be handed out by the DHCP server. In this case, you'll see I exclude 1, which is the default gateway, the router itself, the subinterface, through 10, as we'll put other network hardware between 2 and 9, or 2 and 10, and I will do the same on all 3 networks. So accounting is done. We've defined the network, and we've given it a default router. We will do IT's pool next. Same with the IT one. We'll do our exclusion. The third octet is what changed here. This is a name, a friendly name for it. This is the network and the default router. And the last one will be the HR pool. Excluded address. The third octet changes. The pool name is HR. Here's the network and the default router. Okay, so at this point, let's take a look at our client PCs. We may have to force the DHCP process to take place, or the PCs might just already have an IP address. So looking at the network cards, I could see that one of the 3 have changed. and it is active. So we will do an IF config on that. Okay, we can now see that we have an IP address. It started where we would expect it to, .11. And looking over at the next client, I see the interface has changed and it says it's active. I will refresh the IF config and we can see that we have also acquired an IP address and the third octet is different, and the last one appears to have changed as well, and it also acquired the IP address we would expect it to. So at this point we can do our testing. So PC1 in the left side is the accounting VLAN, PC2 is IT, PC3 is HR. So let's see if accounting can ping HR and IT. Looks like we have responses for IT. And HR. We will do the same here. IT will be pinging the accounting PC. That is successful. And IT will be pinging the HR PC. That is also successful. The last one would be for HR to ping IT and accounting. HR can ping accounting and IT. So at this point, looks like the configuration is successful. Some verification commands we can use would be on the router to do a show IP DHCP binding. This will tell us if our clients are picking up addresses from the DHCP pools and what those addresses are. So as you can see, our configuration was successful, so each client picked up an address. However, for troubleshooting, this very, very helpful screen, or to see what addresses are even used, you would want to use this. If the client had not picked up an address, the first verification would be the switch to validate the VLANs are configured correctly, validate the interfaces are up. As I said, the switch ports are up by default. However, there also is the side of the client where you need to validate someone plugged the Ethernet cable into the right port on the client. Most PCs only have one NIC. However, it is possible there would be two NICs, and that could cause the link not to come up. After you validate the link is up, you could do that with the show MAC address table interface, the interface you want to look at. So this shows us right here that the switch is learning a MAC address from the client. So we should be good on the switch's perspective. I hope this was helpful. I'm going to end the video here. If you have any questions, please let me know.